Hello everyone, welcome to Middle Fantasy. I am your host Zack, and we're going to be doing something a little interesting today. Today we're doing something sort of like a Q&A style thing where we're talking about fantasy. And for me, I'm going to be doing this a little differently. It's going to be probably less editing, more just me here, but giving some detailed questions. And this is going to be a lot of random things, so I don't know what's really going to be happening because I got these little questions. Ooh, just hear that. Yeah, so I have some paper and each one has a different question on it. Now, when it comes to this, what we're going to be doing is, for right now, I'm going to be picking 5 of these and we're going to be answering them. I'm going to answer them to the best of my ability, as well as some of them are good, some of them are bad. Some of them I don't even remember what I put down because some of these have been for weeks upon weeks upon weeks, and this is totally is like a magical box of nothingness and totally not like a thing that I use for meal prepping. So why don't we get into this? I am a little scared because I don't really know how to answer some of these. Some of these are going to be very much like pretty much the first thing that pops into my mind. Some of them might be more formulated after so many months and years of just thinking about them constantly. Some of them are basics, some of them are scary. So why don't we dig into it? So I've opened this. I didn't have like a huge opening ceremony, so I already shook these up. Well, I'll just do a little more. Ooh. Okay, are you all ready for this? I know that I am, so I'm going to use my hands. Now I guess I'm a hand model now? I don't know. Okay, let's okay, here's one. This is the first one. You ready? Do you watch any other Booktube channels? For fantasy, because this is all fantasy, I think this is one from a book tag thing I was gonna do. Yes, I do. I watch quite a few. I know a lot of them are kind of like I watch Quinn's Ideas. He's really good at talking about Dune and A Song of Ice and Fire. He's one of my favorites, as well as In Deep Geek. I can listen to that guy read the frickin' phone book. He does a lot of amazing live streams, especially some of them like 3 or 4 hours long, so I'll put those on to go to sleep, and I'll let him lull me to sleep about like Robert's Rebellion, the Targaryens, things along that line. Those are some of my favorite booktube channels. I also listen to, or I guess I watch, I don't really listen to, even though I do listen to some podcasts. If we're going to do the listening part, it would be like Fantology is one, the Duke and Dutchess podcast, the 17 Shard does the Shardcast. Other ones that I do is there's a lot of other Tales from the Waystone Inn. That's another really good one. I listen to a lot of podcasts because I'm a really big podcast person. Before I started doing YouTube stuff, I was doing podcasts. I actually had one called Radio Camp Hapla. I also did a Goosebumps one called Welcome to Fear Street, or Nightmare on Fear Street. Well, I can't remember my own titles. And then I didn't even do one before that. This was my first one that I did, was called Turning Back the Pages. So I kind of was steeped into that. Some podcast else that I listened to was actually like The Real Weird Sisters. They're some of my favorites. It's a Harry Potter one, but they really do go in depth with the book, but at the same time, they don't let their nostalgia beat around what's good and what's bad about the series, and they've kind of had a shakeup recently for obvious reasons. They have some amazing content, and I say check them out because they're a lot of fun, and hopefully one day I can actually have them both on here to talk about what it's like to do a book club, because doing a book club is so weird and different, because you just get into the minutia of things, and when you like really, laser focus in on one series, as kind of I was doing with Stormlight, I'm still trying to do in some other books, it can be interesting, especially the group of people that kind of congregate to your content really want you to know the ins and outs, and sometimes you might mess up, and sometimes that's good, and sometimes that's bad. Okay, let's do another one. I gotta do a goofy face every time I do it, I guess. Ooh, God, they're like stuck together. Okay. Why fantasy? Why fantasy? Okay. I think this is just, why am I using fantasy as my subject? Fantasy for me is something that you can tell a lot of stories within the fantasy genre. You can have wizards, you can have dragons, you can have old dead gods, you can have warriors. For me, I think the appeal of it is that you can take a lot of stories that, reflect our modern ideas and sensibilities and project them in a way where it's either medieval, there's less technology, and you can really delve into stories that really talk about, for me, I like the human condition. I really like delving into a character, what makes them tick. And I think what's interesting about fantasy compared to other genres is you can almost, in theory, have like the physical manifestation of like your inner demons almost. Like in Stormlight you can have things like there's actually like physical embodiments of things you hold dear, and things like bloodlust, depression, and certain things are made visual, and you can really get down, try to figure out what makes a person tick through that, especially having like a physical embodiment of it other than like a concept or an idea. Though concepts and ideas in fantasy also do fascinate me, especially when it comes to the idea of moral principle. And when you have all this power, do you use it for good? Are you a bad guy? Can you solve all your problems with magic? Those are some of my favorite things. That's why I really like A Song of Ice and Fire. Is you really delve into what's good and what's bad, and you can really, hammer in those points. I think one of the reasons why I also like fantasy is I kind of like the idea of having like this otherworldly technology. It isn't just a cell phone. It isn't just, the internet. I mean, some stories I've read have that type of stuff, but it isn't like I can't solve all my problems by Googling it or something. And that's something that I really enjoy about the fantasy genre is it can be very low technology or it can be really high technology, but you can twist and turn things, and being able to explore that's a lot of fun. And especially when it comes to book series, there are so many book series of ones that are 10 plus books in a series, or one book, or duologies, or trilogies, or quadrilogies. There's so many different versions of this that it kind of becomes crazy. But for me, I love fantasy for that reason. I remember, gosh, seeing Harry Potter for the first time in movies, theaters. Yeah, it's hard to think about because it's been a while since I've thought actively about the movies. Lord of the Rings, I saw the Peter Jackson movies in theaters. And I think for me, what really stuck with me is kind of, for me, I was a movie person. I still am. Just a whole shelf of movies back behind me. But seeing that like in a fantastical world setting, being able to see that really on the big screen at a really young age really did influence me. Especially, I mean, there's the Star Wars prequels and the Star Wars sequels and the original trilogy have kind of like shaped me, and why, like, yeah, I guess people like, that's not fantasy, it's science fiction. Well, it's pretty much science fantasy, or fantasy. It starts off with like a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. Once upon a time, you have those twists and turns, and it's always just been something that's really gravitated towards me. There's other things, but really, when it comes to fantasy, I really enjoy it for a lot of reasons other than magic is cool, wizards are cool, dragons are cool. Those are fun, but those can be sometimes the obstacles, or kind of the very minor things, because some of my favorite series don't really have magic. It's like a low magic world. I mean, I guess like A Song of Ice and Fire starts off very low magic, but as of right now, it's much bigger. Same as with like the Eliza Locke Lamore and the Gentleman Bastard series, The Name of the Wind. Again, it's very loose in the interpretations, but I like them more than just magic's awesome. Let's roll a d20. Yeah. Okay, so let's do one more, or actually, we have to do three more. First, it was three. Now it's a couple more. Ooh. Okay. Okay, yeah. Favorite ride at Disneyland. I guess the reason why I put this in there's Fantasyland, and sometimes I'll put stuff in here as just ideas. Actually, this is a good one because I can talk about it. Fantasy Lake, and that is for me my favorite ride at Disneyland when Disneyland's open. 'Cause I'm a huge Disneyland person, theme park person. Is the Haunted Mansion. That's fantasy related. There's a lot of spooky ghosts and a lot of interesting stories. I could tell you every little detail about the Haunted Mansion. I can tell you the smallest things, the little details that I really like. Personally, for me, the reason why I like it is it's both a mixture of funny and scary. The beginning parts of it are scary, but then you can actually see the exact moment where Walt Disney died and all the Imagineers didn't know what to do. So they started to make it goofy and fun because they had those two tones. Before Walt died, he was like the mediator. And the second you get out of the basement, it becomes fun and goofy. But before that, it's like horrifying, like people trying to get out of coffins. You have Constance, the widow bride. You have the opening of the ride is basically you. The idea is you have to kill yourself, and like, well, there's always my way, and you're just kind of like in this weird like memento mori setting. And for me, I like that, especially when it comes to the story. It's very, I guess, like when it comes to a lot of dark rides at Disneyland before it was all super duper IP. It's more of their series of vignettes, but I've always been the person who likes to connect all the stories and kind of figure out a bunch of the things. I know there's like short stories and there's a Haunted Mansion comic book that came out, and there's things that try to connect things. I did see the Eddie Murphy movie in theaters because even back then when it came out, I was a huge Haunted Mansion fan, especially when it comes to Pirates of the Caribbean. Like I really like that type of style of vignettes and dark rides, and man, I'm gonna go on for forever. I can easily talk about this though. Before I leave, I guess my favorite ghost, the ride is probably the Hatbox Ghost because he has one of the most interesting histories, as well as when it comes to him, he's one of the more unique ghosts there. I mean, there's plenty of unique ones, but for the most part, he's the one that I really am drawn to and aesthetically. He's like so pleasing to the eye. Yeah, I mean, I could talk about this ride for hours. I mean, I could make a whole video on this. Well, I think we'll do another one. Woo! Ooh, this is a long one. Okay. If you could have one book right now, what would it be? I know my brain thought of something, and I'm just gonna go off my gut, and that is Doors of Stone by Patrick Rothfuss. And before people like, I wish you could have it right now. It's worth the wait. Is that for me? If I could have it right now, that would be amazing. I'd love to get my hot little hands on it. I mean, if I could become a like a beta reader or an alpha reader or a zeta reader, I would jump on that opportunity. But if it was released right now and it isn't the way that Patrick Rothfuss really wants it, I mean, he actually just did a whole Q&A with like world builders and stuff. Like, if he didn't care about the book would already be out. And I just really just want to see the conclusion of Doors of Stone. But again, I'm like one of those people. It's like, I'll wait, but this gives me time to read books. But if I could have Doors of Stone right now, I would. And the reason why is the King Killer Chronicles is one of my favorite book series of all time. And I just want to see how the story, because it technically isn't supposed to conclude. This is the beginning of a much bigger narrative. After 1,000,000 words, there's going to be 1.5 million more. And I just want to see kind of like how the 3 days kind of work, as well as when it comes to this book series, what's real and what's fake, what theories could possibly correct, and how Patrick Rothfuss is going to curveball us is kind of the things that I think about. When it comes to Doors of Stone, it's a book that I've speculated to death. I mean, I actually, surprisingly, I don't do much King Killer content here because I really don't know what to talk about. And primarily what I mean by that is I could talk about theories, I could talk about just the book in general, what it means to me, and it's something I have to think about to put my own unique spin to it, because a book that's, there's only 2 books out in that community. We dissect every little thing. Like, I really don't know what to talk about that hasn't already been talked about. And that's something I'm probably going to do. But if I could have Doors of Stone right now, right, let's do it. Okay, we'll do 2 more. I think I'm keeping track. If not, oh well, I was never good at math. What is your favorite magical item? For me, my favorite magical item is Nightblood from Warbreaker. I love Nightblood. The reason why I like Nightblood is he's written in a way, because it's, okay, for people that don't know, I guess I should explain this. Nightblood is a talking sword that's one purpose in life is to destroy evil, but the idea of the moral consequences of how does one define evil is in the eye of the beholder. So that's the problem. And what I like about Nightblood is he talks, he has a lot of, he's so optimistic about murdering people. It's actually ingenious how Brandon Sanderson writes them. And I love him for the reason of, again, he's optimistic, but he also interacts with characters in a way where you really do think about the moral implications of what good and evil is in a fun and unique way, compared to just, that's good, that's evil. It's, beauty's in the eye of the beholder. And that's what I like about him. He's also described as being black and like pretty much oozes black essence. And I love that type of dumb stuff, especially when they describe what happens when people wield him, because you wield him, but if you unsheath him, worse things tend to happen, and people just have, gravitated towards the sword. And I think there's going to be a prequel series for Warbreaker just called Nightblood, all about his creation, and I can't wait for that. Hopefully it comes out within my lifetime, because I love the Warbreaker universe, but I also like Nightblood as just a character that he sticks around a little bit. And the first time that I read a certain book and I got there, I hadn't read Warbreaker, but then when I reread it and knew who Nightblood was, I kind of freaked out a little bit, and it's fun and exciting. And yeah, that's one of my favorite magical items, because he's a sword, but also he has consciousness, but also he's a good comedic foil. I mean, you gotta love Sword Nimi. I love Sword Nimi. Okay, so here's the last one. This is for all the donuts in the world. This one's extra long. I just picked it. If you could make any adaptation of a fantasy series, what would it be? So I'm big into adaptation. I like adaptations. Some are good, some are bad. I remember seeing The Last Airbender in theaters, Dragon Ball Z in theaters. What other really, really bad ones? Oh, League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. I saw in theaters. I don't. That was a long time ago. So for me, adaptations are interesting because I've always found there's an interesting formula now where it's bad movie, good TV adaptation, series of unfortunate events, His Dark Material. Kind of some other ones that I'm thinking of right now is hopefully Wheel of Time. Dune's a good example of this. I love the David Lynch version because it's David Lynch being weird. But if you want a more faithful adaptation, it's the sci-fi movies that they kind of make, or like TV movies. Obviously, there's things like The Stand. It movie's pretty good. The adaptation, the TV miniseries is okay. But I guess going into this, I really, really, really would love to adapt the King Killer Chronicles. I mean, again, it's my favorite series, but there's so much you can do with this, and it isn't. The problem that was the hard sell about it is how do you best adapt it? I know they're working on it with like Lin-Manuel Miranda, Patrick Rothfuss, and they want to have songs, they want to have more of the story. There's supposed to be the movie, and then there's supposed to be a TV show. I mean, that's all that stuff is kind of on the back burner a little bit, and I'm kind of surprised a little bit. But Sam Raimi was attached for a little bit for the movie. Lin-Manuel Miranda says he's still working on it. But one of the things I want them to capture for this, if I could adapt it, is kind of the feeling and the tone of it. I don't want it to just be action movie of the week. I want it to be more of the characters, but also a story about telling stories. And you see it from maybe different viewpoints, or you see it how a storyteller might tell a story. Maybe you might focus in on certain things and drift off with Quoth a little bit and see where that leads, rather than just I'm Quoth and I'm going around doing my stuff. My parents were murdered. That's the stuff that I don't really, I mean, I like, but it isn't the thing that I absolutely enjoy. And things that I would love to see is, especially if they have someone that does really good, like, set decoration, or even when it comes to continuity, just seeing the little things in the background where after you watch that season, you go back and you realize it's now a visual sleight of hand rather than a literary sleight of hand. Because that's one thing I love about the King Killer Chronicles as well, is you have there's a lot of references that you have to really be paying attention, and every time you reread the series, you'll pick up something new that's like, is that like intentional, or is that just P-Roth like effing with us? And I kind of want that visually a little bit. And I mean, it's also a tricky book to have because the book's thick. It also kind of rambles a little bit, and it probably would not work well as a movie, but would work well as a streaming show a little bit. But I'm sure they're probably getting cold feet, especially because of Game of Thrones and how that ended. Like, do we want another series that's kind of incomplete? Let's say they do 2 seasons per book. After what do they do for the 5th season? Unless they do like a mini movie about the slower guard of Silent Things, and you go from there. I mean, you could also do the Lightning Tree as a little special. But the characters and the situation is kind of one of those things that I'd love to see adapted. And yeah, it's one of those books that I can see it so visually, in the way that I would see the aesthetic is kind of like going to like a hipster coffee shop where everything's wood, but also everything is very colorful. But there's a lot of music, and I can see why this appeals to people like musicians and artists and people that are creative, because you've always had those feelings, you've always had those senses, and adapting it will kind of be tricky, but at the exact same time, it would be fun to see how people would adapt it. And if I had a chance and an opportunity, actually, I shouldn't be telling the story. I once interviewed someone for something, and I remember like we were walking out waiting for him to get his cab, and we were just talking about projects that he was working on, and one other person was working on. And he was like, "Oh yeah, one of my friends got one of the writing things to write the treatment for the King Killer Chronicles, for the movie version of it." And my brain exploded, and I started jumping up and down, got really excited, and I knew that I couldn't ask him anything because he probably didn't know anything. and there was like a solid 3 seconds where he was like, what the heck is he doing? But I was just too excited to stop what I was doing. And it's like kind of a favorite memory of mine. I mean, I still kind of talk to the person a little bit, but it's one of those where it felt so good to have that feeling of being able to see that someone's working on this project in a way and really getting excited and like fanboying in a way that maybe I shouldn't have, but at the exact same time, it really showed kind of my passion of why I like this property so much. So if we ever get it in a visual form, I'm gonna probably be there at midnight and I'm gonna watch it and we'll see how it is. Again, for me, I'll take everything with a grain of salt, and when it comes to adaptations, you're not gonna have everything. So I've always been fun to see what happens with adaptations and what happens with that. Yeah, I think that pretty much concludes this little thing that we're doing here, and I hope you all enjoyed this. This was actually a lot of fun to do. I know I got so many more of these. Actually, like, yeah, you can see that I got like a lot of these. We'll probably do some more in the future. I'll probably add some more. They'll probably take some away, add some more, shuffle the deck a little bit, and we'll go from there. I think this will be a fun thing to do for a little bit, kind of unwind and kind of think of things on your feet a little bit. I hope you all enjoyed this. If you like this video, maybe consider subscribing down below. I'd really appreciate that. Give this a thumbs up. I would even love you more. Well, everyone, thank you all so much. And like always, may your food and drink ever be tasteful, and may your books be full of fantasy and adventure. Bye, everyone. See ya.